What's going on, everybody? This is Peter coming at you through the tubes of the internet. Today, taking a look at the latest release from Every Time I Die, an album called Radical. I'm excited to discuss and glad you could join.
Fast facts.
Radical, released October 22nd, 2021 via Epitaph Records, is the 9th studio LP from Buffalo, New York-based metalcore act Every Time I Die. The group currently consists of 5 members. Frontman Keith Buckley, along with guitarist Jordan Buckley and Andy Williams, are the core group that have been locked in from the beginning, and they're joined on this release by bassist Steven Michike and new drummer Clayton Hollyoak.
Backstory.
ETID have pretty much stuck to the same setup throughout their 2-decade-plus run, pairing blistering metal instrumentation with deep poetic lyricism and drawing influences from southern rock and screamo to craft chaotic party anthems. To survive 20 years in the game and not mellow out is an accomplishment in itself, but this latest LP, Radical, stands as one of the band's most ferocious outings to date, keeping every bit of their usual in-your-face intensity and taking on topical subject matter like police brutality, climate collapse, and capitalist alienation. These heavy themes, combined with the band's witty sense of humor and exuberant energy, make for another near-perfect album from the metalcore veterans as they continue to prove why they're peerless in this genre.
Track-by-track analysis.
This album has
16 fucking tracks
and clocks in at 51 minutes. The band have been steadily ramping up their runtimes over the years, with more recent albums nearly doubling the length of their early LPs, and Radical is the culmination of that trend, for better or worse. On one hand, it serves as the group's magnum opus, with Keith saying the band's future is somewhat up in the air after this release, but on the other hand, it's just too damn long to flow cohesively throughout. A few tunes around the 3/4 mark feel less essential, like they're rehashing themes already perfectly articulated earlier in the runtime, and I feel like trimming a few latter cuts could have made things more streamlined. It's hard to argue with the end result, though. The record's damn incredible. Any given tune rips, and Every Time I Die I've come through with a huge helping of slop for fans who have been waiting 5+ years for new material.
Track 1, Dark Distance.
Spare only the ones I love, slay the rest!
To open the record, Buckley calls for a reckoning, begging for the slate to be wiped clean of what he dubs dumb, defective machines who feel no shame. Punishing riffs start this cut and really only let up for a breakdown with a minute remaining. The tune drops out everything but a chuggy bass and builds back up into pure sludge. Track 1 starts the listener off in the diseased muck, both musically and lyrically, and that, combined with its eerily prophetic tone about the pandemic, is a perfect starting point for this grimy-ass record.
Track 2, Sly.
ETID craft a cryptic tune here about a character who's wanted like a criminal and use a super tight sync-up between vocals and music to represent that pursuit. The winding, snaky delivery rides the guitar 1-to-1, and it's an acrobatic performance on both ends. Radical is basically a Halloween release, and these first couple tunes have a spooky horror vibe. Paired with lines about being bled dry even with nothing left to give, this track is sinister all around, and it's another awesome cut as the record's still getting warmed up.
Track 3, Planet Shit.
This cut serves as a declaration of war on cops and their corporate masters, calling attention to our bizarro inverse of justice, where the ones who are supposedly sworn to protect instead do harm with complete impunity. Keith demands to know whose fucking side are you on, calling out pigs who uphold white supremacy on behalf of the rich. I absolutely love this tune because it's just so brutal and never equivocates, establishing an us versus them dynamic where for humanity to survive, these Nazi mutants have to be eliminated. In the fictitious story world of Planet Shit, Buckley suggests that violence is the answer, giving these monsters the rope or the guillotine, and it's just really enjoyable subject matter for the type of mind-numbingly heavy cut the band specialize in. This is my favorite tune on the release. It's pure catharsis, and I could rant about how I love pretty much any given line. I'd put this song alongside Floater and Map Change at the very top of the ETID S tier. It's basically the official theme song of the Cool Zone.
Track 4, Post-Boredom.
On the album's first single to receive a music video, Buckley reflects on being jaded, where every morning after is the same day, and guilt from past actions finds him struggling with self-acceptance. The repetitive My Annihilation chorus line has an incessant earwormy quality, and I think this was a good pick to promote the album on because of it. It seems a little simplistic for the sake of accessibility, but its catchy appeal is undeniable. There wasn't a ton I took away from this cut, but I think it works fine as a straightforward rocker. And the idea of emerging from the pandemic lockdown with one more last chance at a fresh start is a cool concept.
Track 5, A Colossal Wreck.
Here Buckley proposes relinquishing control of the earth to Mother Nature and wiping the scourge of mankind off the planet. The abject cruelty of the ruling class is detailed in the lyrics, stating that inequality is artificially created in a time of post-scarcity for the sadistic pleasure of our brain-dead elite. The Colossal Wreck title likely refers to Percy Shelley's sonnet Ozymandias, where a once great and powerful pharaoh statue has been reduced to rubble sinking into the desert sand. And Buckley definitely has the songwriting chops to hang with the great poets of antiquity. He adds his own metaphors like the pale blue dot being replaced by a dark red speck, and imagery of Noah's Ark crashing and drowning all life on Earth. That, paired with the high-speed vocal delivery needed to keep up with the instrumental, makes this tune a manic onslaught of sound. This was the first teaser track released well before the album Radical was announced, and I think it set the tone for how savage the release would be as a whole. It definitely had me anticipating the full album, and I think it's a really strong cut in the context of the record.
I should have been baptized. That's perfect shine. Aimed in my eyes.
Track 6, Desperate Pleasures.
A menacing instrumental starts this tune, where continuously rolling drum beats mirror a simmering desperation bubbling below the surface in the lyrics, until the full band blasts into a wall of sound when that torment comes to a boil. This cut seems to be about how even living in the desolate hell world this album's established, there's still a nagging feeling of hope that can't be ignored, and a desire to fight for a better life. True to form though, this turns out to be completely demoralizing. Keith's faith that things could improve is just a setup for disappointment that leaves him feeling completely hollowed out. Toward the end of the track, there's a perfect line about being at war with a villain who would steal the weapon laid down as a truce, and it's a perfect description of how trusting the current power structure, the men digging graves, to acting anything but their own self-interest is a fool's errand. This track strikes a cool balance between pitch black nihilism and a small glimmer of hope, and I think it's an awesome cut.
Track 7, All This in War.
This song reprises a theme from Planet Shit, where horrors of the past get swept under the rug and can never be atoned for as long as they're never acknowledged. ETID tag in fellow metalcore legend Josh Skogan for a verse late in the cut, and the ex-Chariot frontman brings this distinct manic delivery to lines about not leaving our fate up to chance and instead actively fighting to make positive changes. I love the call and response interplay between the vocals and instrumentals here, and the theme of waging war to make sure our future isn't left up to a coin flip lands perfectly. I think this is an awesome track with a well-used feature.
Track 8, Thing with Feathers.
I think we're done here. No conversation.
The album's chillest tune, and one of the most laid-back the band has ever done, comes at the halfway point of Radical, where clean guitar lines replace the normally blown-out shredding riffs, and Keith sings with a smooth and swelling delivery about the tragic loss of his sister to Rett syndrome. Heartbreaking lines about being trapped in a deteriorating body are followed by hopeful sentiments about leaving that pain behind and remaining an inspiration to loved ones. Manchester Orchestra's Andy Hall guests on the cut, and the way his vocals mesh with Buckley's preserves a pretty quality in the lyrical delivery, even when the backing instrumentation progresses towards the band's usual fuller approach. Every Time I Die have crafted a heartfelt tribute here and stepped pretty far outside their comfort zone musically to do so. I think it's an excellent tune.
Track 9, Hostile Architecture.
Here the band harken back to their Gutter Phenomenon era sound, with a sassy Warp Tour style delivery straight out of the early 2000s.
I know, you hate to hear it.
The Hostile Architecture theme finds Keith waking up again and again in a house he doesn't recognize, and changing his personality to suit the tastes of voyeuristic onlookers observing him in this environment. Hostile Architecture also has some hostile riffs that draw on the southern rocky tone the band were deep into a decade ago. I think it's a nice mix-up in the album sound, even though this wasn't exactly my favorite E-Tid era overall.
Track 10, AWOL.
The shape of your data got me extra protected. But you and I, we need a draw.
This tune seems to be about a failure to communicate, where Keith and another character are on different wavelengths, and things that make him feel personal satisfaction are the same things that drive their connection further apart. Honestly, I didn't take too much away from the lyrics here, and the track does my least favorite E-Tid songwriting thing, where an entire verse is taken up by a single line repeated over and over. This is the shortest cut on the release, but even so, the repetition makes it slightly tedious. This tune never got its hooks in me as a single or here in the context of the album. This is the point in the record where, unless tracks are bringing something really novel to the table, they start kind of blending together. This cut isn't bad, I'd just rather listen to other tracks here.
Track 11, The Whip.
Some really freakish musicianship makes this cut stand out from the pack for me. After half-hour non-stop riffs, it's surprising how E-Tid can still make an individual song sound especially brutal. The band use fairly straightforward metal tones, but build them in intensity until there's nowhere left to go, and then dig their heels in even deeper and take it to another level of grime. Lyrics have a looming violence over everything. Keith uses a running theme of submission for much of the record's remainder, and that seed gets planted here in a sadistic power struggle. Basically, submit to the whip, accept a hyper-normalization of atrocities, and then we'll cut you in on our hedonistic freedom, quote-unquote. I don't feel like I understand the song 100%, but it's a vibe, as they say. It feels claustrophobic, like it's swirling in on the listener, both musically and lyrically, and also feels like it was grown in a lab to get a circle pit going crazy. Incredible tune, in my opinion.
Track 12, White Void.
I got what I came for. After life ago.
E-Tid get another southern gothic groove going here a dozen songs in, and it's a much chiller approach than most on the record. I think there's some cool psychedelic-y production in the opening minute of the cut that gives the song an alt-rock feel. But unfortunately the tune gets more into a generic modern rock sound as it goes on. Lines about warmth disappearing, burning out, running back into the cold all make the white void imagery work well here, along with a nod to Nietzsche's concept of staring into the abyss. I can't fault the lyrics too much, but the song is just too long. As a 2-minute interlude, this could have been an awesome diversion, but as it approaches double that, I think it just fizzles out. Everything cool is accounted for in minute 1, but the song lingers around. My least favorite here.
Track 13, Distress Rehearsal.
Blistering speed is the name of the game for this tune, and I think its constant forward momentum makes it interesting throughout by sheer brute force. It transitions from thrashy metal to a dance breakdown without missing a beat and makes its 3.5-minute runtime disappear. And as a thematic change of pace, this tune seems pretty hopeful. Buckley describes obsessing over expecting the worst, playing out every gory detail, but instead being shocked that something went right for a change. The cut ends on a more ominous note, with Keith saying, "Lose your life and you will find it," like all the bliss previously described might only be achievable after leaving this earthly realm behind. It's heady stuff that gets explored more on the closing tracks, and I think this is a great tune.
Track 14, Sexsexsex.
Here, Keith delves deep into themes of submission, and as the title suggests, he uses bondage imagery, like being tied up in chains, to do so. At face value, the tune's about domination by a sexual partner, but I definitely think there's lines here that extend it more broadly to the powers that be in general. Let the temperature rise around you, accept this collapse that's bearing down on mankind, let Earth become Venus in fur, even hotter and less hospitable. The haunting, brooding sound found in the instrumental really complements the masochistic tone of the lyrics, and I think the laser focus on the theme here keeps this cut afloat.
Track 15, People Versus.
With enough pressure and momentum, we become perfect circles burning brighter than the sun.
Buckley uses this penultimate cut as a call to action, imploring the masses to come together and take back by force what's owed to them. This song states that channeling righteous anger sprung from love into action will propel men into gods, while hand-wringing about civility and refusing to rock the boat would leave men meaninglessly taking up space in graves. The concept of inaction being a conscious choice to keep the status quo, and the kinetic energy associated with an uprising here make for incredible lyricism, and this cut has some awesome musical moments too, like the clapping tone of the percussion during the breakdown, or the fade out in intensity as the cut's coming to a close. This song has an energizing theme and a unique structure. I think it's extremely well done.
Without faith, you can't pray, but you can bend the knee.
Track 16, We Go Together.
We go together like ram 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 ding 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 dong.
I will live forever. All things I dream of, something better.
On the closer, Buckley imagines himself as the center of the universe, where everyone and everything else only exists within his mind. Despite the very literally egocentric subject matter, this tune still retains the communal quality found throughout the record, with Keith stating we all go together and exist as part of him. The band give a larger space to the instrumental and have definitely earned the right to indulge in some more drawn-out movements here, like the Castlevania haunted dungeon tone of the breakdown, or the repetitive lines on the closing groove. Saving the longest track for the end makes this one feel like a grand finale.
Set the fire right out if you're made of flesh.
Verdict.
What more can really be said about this record? The riffs are on another planet, the intensity is explosive, the lyricism I think is a master class from one of the greats. This album builds on all the band's best elements from 20 years worth of finding out what works and what doesn't. I do think the record's a little too long, but does that matter? No. Radical is an extremely obvious 10 out of 10, an instant classic I'd say. Probably some of the best lines I've ever heard here. Check this album out for sure.
There is a fetish, and I am a malcontent.
So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the record. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the release, my critique, or the review format in general. Making this is a lot of work, but also fun, and definitely worth it if it helps some people wrap their head around the record. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
It's a series of tubes.